Today, come together right now. I know it's kind of a play on the Beatles song, which we'll play out with, but we're going to talk about 5 attributes of effective teams. And we're going to begin right now. Sarah?
All right, we're going to actually start with all of you. So for those of you who this is your first time to one of our webinars, this is one of our favorite tools for interacting with you all. For some people who've been logging in for weeks now, you are well familiar. What I'm going to ask you to do is pull out your smartphone. That's the best way to do it. If you need to, you can also open a second browser. Either way, we ask you that you go to menti.com, menti.com, and put in the code 469300 and answer the first question. It's an easy one. What company do you work for, so that we understand who's joining us here today? So we're seeing some good friends from the 49ers, our friends at Root, which is a fantastic change management company, Armstrong, our friends who make the ceiling tiles that you all probably have, looking up at you right now.
St. Louis Blues. We've got Metro West Fire. Thanks for being out there on the front line, folks. A little Sapper Consulting, another group here, fastest growing company in St. Louis. Great work there. Panasonic.
Put in on chat. So if you're unable to work the Menti, feel free to put in your response on chat. That works equally as well. So
welcome to BKD as well. And real quick, the profanity filter is already catching people. You can't work for a bad word, can you? I guess so.
I don't know. I guess you can. Perhaps you just didn't like the question. All right. Second question for you all. This webinar is on effective teams. So the question that we have for you is, what percentage of work in your organization do you estimate is done in teams? 90%, 75%, 50%, or 25%? Or perhaps you are quite the solo act. So as we see these come in, we see a majority of people in that 75 to 90% category. So by a good margin, we would say a majority of work. Research would substantiate this, and depending on the study that you look at, between 60 and 90% of work in organizations is in fact done in teams, which makes this a really, really important topic. So from that, we ask you the question, if we're doing all of this work in teams, what statement best characterizes your prior experience in working in a team, kind of overall? And we know this is a big, broad, general question, but if you had to pick one, is it teamwork makes the dream work, love it, want more of it? Perhaps it's a collection of adults who need a little bit more supervision, an exercise in frustration, inefficiency, and the occasional holiday party, and or D, at least there's a paycheck in it. I know we're having fun a little bit with some of these statements, but for some of us, we've had fantastic experiences, been on some phenomenal teams that have produced greater amounts of work, better innovation, and for some of us, it is a little bit of that exercise in frustration, who picked these team members and can I perhaps train some of them out? And so our final introductory question for you all, and this is an important one, it's the seminal question, is there or is there not an I in team? So true or false? So okay, as these come in, the great debate continues. A majority say actually true, there is an I in team, and we're going to answer that one officially at the end of this webinar. So we're going to make you wait for that answer to that really, really important question. The other, as we started to do research for this particular webinar, it is somewhat fraught with team building statements, team mantras, and a lot, for some reason, if you look at graphics for team webinars, there's a lot of people rowing together in boats. So we just put this in to say we have no pictures of people actually rowing in the same direction in a boat. So this is all that you're going to see on that note. However, we are going to give you some memes of this nature. So team building, sometimes the most important lesson you can learn is that you're not a very good team. A better definition, and we do have a slide with our very own hometown Stanley Cup winning St. Louis Blues on it. So we're glad that you all are on the webinar today. We love working with you all. Teams, it's where work gets done. Much of the work in any organization, as you all evidenced, is done collaboratively in teams. This is certainly where the effort happens, the production happens. It's where ideas are born and hopefully cultivated, and it's where employees experience most of their work. But it's also where work can struggle. This is potentially where productivity is hindered. A lot of times this happens in those meetings that we're in, where we just can't seem to get something across the finish line. interpersonal issues crop up. Perhaps we haven't constructed the teams appropriately. We have skill sets that don't necessarily go together. And oftentimes we're not entirely sure what the goal of the group actually is. So as we tend to do, we look for historical references of really fantastic teams, one of which is the group of individuals who actually put a man on the moon. That team, so to speak, was actually 400,000 people. That's the number of people that NASA estimates were required to get a man on the moon. Teams are highly interdependent. They plan work, they solve problems, they make decisions, and they review progress in service of a specific project. This is very different than a work group. And so it's an important differentiation to say today we're not talking about people that perhaps I'm just running an idea by, or perhaps we work for the same organization, we're sitting in the same update meeting. That is not a team. Teams are very highly interdependent. Another example of a very famous team is the Tuskegee Airmen. And so their fame hails from specifically World War II. They were the first all-Black squadron in the United States Air Force. And right before they were to be certified to instill confidence in their ability, Eleanor Roosevelt actually flew with them, which was kind of a seminal moment for that particular group. And they were so kind of bonded as a team, they actually painted the tails of their aircraft red so that people would know this is the Tuskegee Airmen and you know what you're up against. What you don't hear in some of these kind of famous team examples is a lot of references to individuals. And we tend to talk about them as if they're one unit. And sometimes that is the hallmark of a really effective team, that it doesn't necessarily include a lot of superstars. And so we wanted to play a short bit of a TED Talk. This is Margaret Heffernan that we're going to play, and it's just a couple of minutes. But she talks a little bit about why superstars can actually be to the detriment of a team that you're trying to build.
An evolutionary biologist at Purdue University named William Muir studied chickens. He was interested in productivity. I think it's something that concerns all of us. But it's easy to measure in chickens because you just count the eggs. He wanted to know what could make his chickens more productive, so he devised a beautiful experiment. Chickens live in groups, so first of all, he selected just an average flock, and he let it alone for 6 generations. But then he created a second group of the individually most productive chickens. You could call them super chickens. And he put them together in a super flock. In each generation, he selected only the most productive for breeding. After 6 generations had passed, what did he find? Well, the first group, the average group, was doing just fine. They were all plump and fully feathered, and egg production had increased dramatically. What about the second group? Well, all but 3 were dead. They'd pecked the rest to death. The individually productive chickens had only achieved their success by suppressing the productivity of the rest.
And folks, we will give you all the links to all the videos that we're showing. We're only showing you a very small portion of her TED Talk. She's a tremendously talented person. It's a great talk. So make sure we provide that to you. When we talk about building an effective team, we're going to take 3 steps. We're using the Avengers here as a really good example. Everyone has certain gifts, certain strengths, certain talents, but what's really important is how they come together to build more than just the individual parts. So there's 3 steps. 1 is create the environment, 2 is rate your current state, and then 3 is do the work of leadership. We're going to dive into each one of those. In creating the environment, we like to use the word, and we like to work with the concept of inspiration. The verb inspire, it literally means to fill someone with the urge or ability to do or feel something. We like the Latin version of this, to breathe life into. And so for that, I'm going to ask you to we're just going to ask you, tell me a word that inspires you. And I'm going to jump back into Mentimeter and give you that. And this is going to be a word cloud again. Just put in the word that inspires you. Just what the first thing that comes to mind. We don't need to rethink it, just the first word that inspires you. We've got a good 200 and something, 250, 270 people on this. On the bottom right-hand corner there, you will see the number of people that are putting that word in. So if you don't mind, just join into Menting. If you're not there yet, it's MENTI, menti.com. Just put in that code. It's listed right there at the top of your screen, 469300. If you cannot, just put in the chat and we'll have Jamie, she'll put that in for you. The larger the word in the center is, the more people put that exact same word in. You can put in any language you'd like, but that first word that comes up, what's a word that inspires you? And as you see, I see hope, love, challenge, family, courage, growth, faith, kindness. What's interesting, and we've ran this with probably over 100,000 people, honestly, this exact experience, this exact question. It's part of our leadership curriculum. What's interesting about this and what you will see is you don't see a few things like profitability, ROI, market share. Oftentimes you don't even see money, and I don't see it up there right now. On occasion you will. I would say probably around 1 to 2% of the time someone will put money in. If you ask them, why did you put the word money? Tell me a story behind that. The first thing, every single time I've done this, the first thing the person says is, well, we didn't have a lot of it growing up. And I'll be damned if I'm going to want for that, or my family is going to want for that. It wasn't about money that inspired him. It was about what money allows. Options, ability to do other things. And so that's the Chris Rock quote is a great one. He said, being rich isn't about having a lot of money. Being rich is having a lot of options. And so the reason I bring this up is what inspires you is what inspires your people. And so it's not a bad thing to talk about the money or the profitability or clients or all of the measurable things that we should be looking at to run a business. It's the lifeblood. It's like a dashboard, but it doesn't inspire people. I'm going to bring us back into the slide deck, and I'm going to show you 2 ways organizations communicate that will articulate this point. I'm going to show you, and I'm a car person, so I'm going to show you 2 videos of how car companies communicate to the outside world. Here we go. This is the first one.
Today we're here to talk about trucks.
I love trucks.
Well, what truck brand comes from the family of the most dependable, longest lasting full-size pickups on the road?
I think it's a Chevy.
Ford.
It's not Ford.
I think it's Ram.
It's not Ram either.
That's
It's Chevy.
Gorgeous.
Get a total value of $11,000 when you finance with GM Financial. That's over 20% below MSRP on this Chevy Silverado. Find new roads at your local Chevy dealer.
Okay, and nothing wrong with that. Listen, Chevy makes a great product. This is not anything wrong with it whatsoever, but that's a pretty standard car commercial. It's a way a company communicates to the outside world about their product or their service. Here's what it is. I'm going to compare it against the competitors, and then I'm going to tell you about what the price, perhaps a little bit about features. I'm going to show you another commercial, and if you're doing something like multitasking or you kind of have me on in the background, I'm going to ask you because you will appreciate this one. Very few of you have ever seen this commercial, and you want to. And so I'm going to show you this one. This is by Tesla. The reason it feels different isn't because of the great lighting, it isn't because of the camera work, and it isn't just because of the words, it's because they use the same activity. What inspired you were stories about people, hope, love, faith, family, challenge, growth, all of those words you gave me and meant to me, or I'll even show you again. This is what future, hope, challenge, love, growth, family, this is what Tesla just did to you. And by the way, they didn't make this commercial. This was made by fans of the car. I'm not saying Chevy's bad and Tesla's great. It's nothing about that. I'm just simply showing you the two ways organizations can communicate to one another. And it feels different when you watch the Tesla one because they start from a different place. They start from people serving people. The car was just in between this. So it's a reason why, and I'm going to go back to one of our first webinar series, and it was on turn this one up to 11, amp up your communication. It's why when we do team huddles or meetings, we start with, I want to recognize people recognizing other people, who they are and what they do matter. And I'm going to link the recognition celebration to whatever values I have. That's how I start a meeting. I'm going to end the meeting on personal connection. In between, we're going to get business done. We move fast. We do a lot of things. We're going to do that. And we're going to measure all the things we should be measuring. But in between that, I'm going to start and I'm going to finish with a connection of people to people. And yes, I'm sorry for those of you on the chat room telling me that I made you cry. We will provide that video. I'll provide you links of all this so you can talk to people about it. It really is a beautiful, beautifully done commercial by fans of Tesla.
All right, how to build an effective team. Create the environment, rate your current state, and do the work of leadership. So once I've created this environment of inspiration, I need to look at all the factors that drive effectivity from a team standpoint. There was a question or a comment in the Q&A that there's a lot of emphasis around the work that is done in teams, but teams are a great place where really good questions are asked. And so Google asked a great one. Why are some of our teams effective and others are less so? If you think about Google as an organization, they have access to the best and the brightest. They have a tremendous talent pool. They can effectively handpick each of their teams. And so why is it in such an organization like that, and we hire all the top talent, we pay top of the market, and people believe in the work that we do, people would essentially, they would kill to work at Google. So what explains the discrepancy in teams? And as they looked into this research, they had to define what is an effective team. And so what was interesting and what they found is that leaders would define an effective team differently than team members would. For leaders, it was about productivity. Did we hit our sales targets or did we not? For the team members, it was much more about the culture of the team. And so before they went into this qualitative research and this project that we're going to talk about, they had to define what that was. And so effective teams met standards for quality. They stayed on budget and schedule. They had low turnover of team members. There was high engagement or participation. And as they looked into this, they wanted to evaluate based on 4 criteria. Yes, the leader's evaluation from an executive level, the team leader evaluation, what the team members actually had to say, and then also the productivity numbers, or in their case, sales performance. So this is what effective teams, and they decided to name this project after Aristotle and his quote, "The whole is greater than the sum of the parts." So Project Aristotle was born. They did a tremendous amount of, from a data standpoint, but also from a qualitative standpoint, interviewing numbers of people inside Google. And all of this stuff is open source. We will send you the link to it because they've got a great deal of discussion guides, and we find it really, really valuable for the work that we do, and it's open to anybody who wants to access it. One of the points that was really important is, well, what doesn't drive effective teams? If we're going to talk about what does, what are the things that actually we spend a lot of time on that perhaps doesn't get the result that we want? And so here's their list. Co-location of teammates, consensus driving decision making, the extroversion of team members, maybe that team is just more fun to be on, the individual performance of team members, that goes back to the super chicken point made by Margaret Heffernan, the workload size, seniority, team size, or tenure. So these are all the variables not connected to team effectiveness. What they did find was what matters less about who's on the team and more about how the team works together.
Yeah, and listen, I appreciate everyone mentioning about if we're having some sound issues. I know it looks like the internet is a little clogged up today, and so we're having some problems, but just let us know if our sound is dropping in or out, and we'll work on our end as well. I appreciate letting us know there. So what matters less about is who's on the team and more about how the team works together? Yeah, but you're showing a picture of the Air Force demonstration team, the Thunderbirds. All of these are incredibly skilled men and women pilots. What's interesting about this is I've had 3 friends of mine that have been in this squadron and flown at the Thunderbirds, both as a commander and then as in the formation. And what was interesting is during their interviews and during the time that they're selecting the pilots, it's not that anyone could ever do this, but there's clearly more than just the 7 pilots that make up the Thunderbirds qualified to actually be a demonstration pilot. What they were looking for, though, in the interviews and the selection was team fit. Is this person a quote unquote team player? In other words, were they after the fame, that kind of stuff as an individual, or did they want to do whatever was necessary for the benefit of the team, be very disciplined? And so that's the selection criteria they met, even though there was a number of people that were qualified. The ones that actually were extremely humble, very, pun intended, down to earth, and also, yes, incredible pilots. But they just didn't go after who can actually fly the machine. They went after who is a great team member. So Google, their research shows that these are the 5 factors of what makes an effective team. The top one was psychological safety. Team members feel okay and be vulnerable in front of each other. This doesn't mean that we're all going to sit around and watch that Tesla commercial and cry and talk about our parents or something like that. It's not that. It's that I'm okay to ask for and receive help. The second one was dependability. Team members get things done on time. Structure and clarity was 3rd. Meaning and impact rounded out 4 and 5. And these are those 5 factors, and we're going to ask you to interact with them every step. Sarah? And Sarah, you're on mute really quick, so I'm going to, as you're coming off and working sound, there you go.
A quick litmus test is, how do I know if it exists or it doesn't exist? And so this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot of different things we could have put here. But in the category of psychological safety, if it exists, you start to hear, I don't know and I need help. And you hear that frequently, versus meetings that end in silent disagreement. We all walk out and we know you and you do not agree with each other, but we are not going to address it. Dependability, deadlines are met within standards, versus we hit the deadlines, but there is a lot of kind of heroics that are employed to do it. Structure, job requirements are known, versus meetings after the meeting. And meetings after the meeting, and the conversation seems to go on and on. Meaning, the purpose of actions are known, and it's not necessarily that it has to be some life-giving, life-saving purpose, but I understand that my actions are going to have this result, versus, it's just a job, and I'm going to clock out at the end of the day. Impact, progress toward organizational goals can be quantified, versus I'm running a marathon and there are no mile markers. I'm just showing up, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm kind of in this never-ending sprint. So with those definitions and kind of that background of exists or doesn't exist, we want to put you back into Mentimeter, and I'm going to ask you, what effective team factor would you rate as the most important to you personally? We all are wired a little bit differently, and Google has them in a particular order from their research, but we all tag into these occasionally with a different perspective. And so for me, I might say, well, dependability is the most important. Yes, I do want to feel psychologically safe, but it's really important to me that people are getting what they need to get done when it needs to be done, versus some people who say, I need to be able to see the impact of my work. So for you personally, how would you rate these? And I know this is a little bit of a different mechanism inside Mentimeter, and it may take just a couple seconds for you to manipulate those and put them in the order that's most important to you. So as these come in, we see we've got a good number of people who are all about that structure and clarity. Okay, moving around a little bit. Psychological safety kind of coming up to the top. And there's no right or wrong. This isn't about one person that has to be true for them or has to be true for somebody else, but it is a conversation that you can have with your team, saying, here's what one organization found drove effective teams, and therefore let's talk about it with our team, and we'll give you a tool and a resource to be able to do that.
And hey, Sarah, I know we have a lot of questions coming in about, well, how do we balance this with connection? Wasn't a huge driver of this, but Simon Sinek talks about people are hardwired for connection. Another one about, hey, why didn't we talk about diversity? We'll get into each one of these areas, psych safety, and give you examples of these. What they were finding were, what are the behaviors that were leading to effective teams? My individual makeup of a team doesn't necessarily drive effectiveness. What drives effectiveness is the behaviors that we exhibit to one another. And so we'll dive in and we'll make sure that we go through all of your questions and get those out, but we're going to get into each one of these areas.
All right, and the next question that we're going to ask you is, what effective team factor is your team's greatest strength? So regardless of what's important to you personally, when you look at the team that you're a part of, perhaps the team you lead or perhaps the team that you're a part of, what is your team's greatest strength? We're fantastic at structure and clarity. Everybody knows exactly what they need to get done, but I don't hear a lot of, I need help, or perhaps I don't know, coming out of my team. We're great at the meeting. Everybody kind of oozes meaning, but we kind of lack on the dependability. So for your team, what is your team's greatest strength? And it's looking like we have quite a few dependable teams out there, which is great. I will offer and I will share, and it may or may not come out this way with such a large group on the phone, but typically when we run this with intact teams, and so we have an intact team together, and we do this exact same exercise, psychological safety tends to be near the bottom. It's not always last, but it tends to be near the bottom. And so Google's saying this is the most important factor, and for a lot of us, it can be the area that we tend to struggle the most. All right, and as we transition back over, we're going to break down each one of these 5 categories. So we mentioned how important psychological safety is, and we define it as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk. So what does this look like? How do I know that we're doing well? Teammates feel safe to take risks, where we're not embarrassing or punishing, which I know seems extreme, but sometimes these things happen in kind of the subtle moments. What you can look for is, are people willing to admit mistakes? When something happens to somebody says, my bad, that was 100% on me, and take ownership. We ask a lot of questions. It was a great comment earlier that teams are a place where we ask good question and we tend to get a lot of new ideas. So a couple of suggestions, starting each meeting with recognition. We already mentioned that one. From a leadership standpoint, the leader goes first. And so are we willing to admit when the leader is wrong? One of the things that we saw as we looked for an example of organizations who do this really, really well is any organization that uses the idea of a hackathon. So Microsoft happens to run the world's largest hackathon, where they get a lot of new ideas. And essentially the goal is, can we put really, really smart people in a room and can we generate as many ideas as possible? Honda does this as well. And so there's a number of organizations that some of their kind of landmark products or things that they're known for have come out of creating this environment where the goal isn't necessarily the right idea, but the goal is as many ideas as possible. So one way that organizations create or cultivate that sense of psychological safety. Another example we would give you comes from the medical community, which we know is very hard hit right now. And there's a doctor in Australia who kind of pioneered this idea that we actually need to put first names on scrub caps. And so what he was observing in the operating room was life-saving techniques and life-saving procedures were actually delayed from the embarrassment that people didn't know each other's names. And so if you think about in the surgical community, I may or may not know my anesthesiologist. And so when those heightened moments happen, if I can call you by your first name, I increase psychological safety. I avoid mix-ups and I eliminate kind of that emotional embarrassment that I don't actually know. And so this is taken off and there's a huge campaign around it that a lot of hospitals are doing this, and it actually has literally saved lives. I'm going to put you back into Mentimeter and I'm going to ask you one additional question. So if this is so important and it's so valuable to effective teams, then what percentage of employees strongly agree with the statement, my opinions count at work? So if we want these psychologically safe environments, I want everybody to feel like they can speak up. How many of us actually do? And so as these answers come in, those of you who selected 33%, you are correct. 3 out of 10 people strongly agree with the statement that my opinions count at work. What's really interesting is that Gallup took it one step further and actually looked at if we were to double that amount. So if we moved from 3 of 10 to 6 of 10, this is the result: a 27% reduction in turnover, a 40% reduction in safety incidents, and a 12% increase in productivity. And this from Amy Edmondson, who wrote a great book. It showed up in the chat. We love her as well, The Fearless Organization. It's not enough for organizations to simply hire talent. If leaders want to unleash individual and collective talent, they must foster psychologically safe climates where employees feel free to contribute ideas, share information, and report mistakes. The middle statistic in particular, we love. If I want a safe culture, if I want people to raise their hand and say, this is not okay, then I have to create an environment of high psychological safety. Another example for you as we transition to the next element, we were trying to think of, okay, what's a famous great example of a team who embodies this? And this would be Saturday Night Live. And if you think about the history of SNL, and even to the point of them doing a show from home, if any of you caught that last week, their ability to transfer in and out talent and yet have that same kind of high level of performance. And you literally have to pitch your ideas and get shot down continually and be willing to pitch new ideas. They've had over 600 plus unique musical guests. They actually had the first televised rap performance. Their most recurring act was Paul Simon, and their highest rated act was Prince. They actually, because they were all listening to music as they were developing these ideas, they started to share the music that they were listening to, and they pushed the boundaries much more so than shows like the Tonight Show, especially in the early days. So SNL, a great example of psychological safety.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And as we go through these, this was psych safety. And so this was the rated one. And I know there's a lot of chat going on, but do me a favor, and would you just put into the chat room for your organization, if you've found ways to increase psych safety, do you mind sharing that with the rest of the group? And we're going to ask you to share at each one of these stages. So psych safety, we're going to be moving into dependability. At each one of these areas, just put in the chat room about what you've done in your organization to increase that so other people can learn. And the more specific in the behaviors, you can get the better learning for each other. So as we transition from that psych safety into dependability, literally the quality of being reliable. Can I reliably complete quality work on time? I don't shirk my responsibilities, and when I say I'm going to do something, I follow through with it. The example we're showing here is the U.S. Women's Cup, and I understand that there's a little bit of controversy. There usually is in sports and competition, but this is a group that did a really, really fantastic job at each person playing their position. And when you think about any sports team, each person, each individual has to do and be very dependable in their own position for the overall team to be a much more effective team. And when you think about this, whether we're talking sports teams, military, business, nonprofit, any one of these are the factors. And the reason we're sharing Project Aristotle with you is this is an actual organization, not just someone who's thinking about it, but an actual organization that really was trying to figure out, man, we get a lot of great talent. Why is it some of these teams are highly effective and some are not? So under dependability, we look a lot at the suggestions we have is I'm looking at my skills-based training programs. What behaviors my people, my leaders need training on? As an example, most of the time we promote our best doer into position of leadership. Rarely are we giving that person, stats show about 50% of the time only, we're giving that person any training on, this is a new job for you. I'm going to give you some skill sets, some training on being a leader. And another suggestion would be for each missed deadline, determine whether it was a system failure, in other words, how the work was aligned, or is it behaviors on the team? Those are some suggestions right there for dependability. The example I will give you, so when I was going through my undergrad, I was an aircraft mechanic. I came in the Air Force as an enlisted guy and then later had a career as an officer. This is the aircraft I worked on. This is a Canadian version. This is a C-130. And you'll see the different crew member positions here. On the left side there, she is the aircraft commander and actively flying the aircraft this time. To her right, closest to you, on bottom right here, that's the co-pilot. The co-pilot's job, obviously, monitoring the radios, looking at the instruments as well, being the backup to the aircraft commander. This is an older version of this aircraft, and so sitting between the two of them, you can just see his hands. That's the flight engineer. The flight engineer is looking at that top panel there. The top panel has all of the engine, fuel, and generator, the T-handles there for fire. He's monitoring all of those systems, hydraulics, all of those things. And then to the left there, there's probably either an observer or the navigator who's come up from the back. In the back of the aircraft, you have one or two other people, and they're called load masters, and they're there to make sure whatever cargo is being carried is being strapped down, tied down, whatever it needs to be, or perhaps it's passengers in the back. The point of this is each one of these positions is really critical, but the dependability for each person to know their job and to do their job is what makes an aircrew highly effective. And so for that reason, we give you this example about dependability. And so I'd ask again, what are ways that you have been able to increase dependability in your own organization? If you wouldn't mind putting some of those in the chat so other people can learn from what you have done. The third one, structure and clarity. Give organization to in a coherent manner. Do the team members understand my job expectations? Do they know how to meet them? And are they cognizant of the consequences of their performance, whether good or bad? In other words, the impact they have on the other team members. I'm going to jump over to the right here. The reason we're showing Bon Jovi, the reason for Bon Jovi is they have a very, very different business model inside of their band. In fact, they often refer to John Bon Jovi as the CEO of the band. So when we think about structure and clarity, they're very, very different than just 4 people going out and playing music. And by the way, just a fun fact, they were told that their first name for the band was going to be Johnny Electric. And someone said, you should do the same thing Van Halen does. And you should use your own last name, John's last name, Bon Jovi, as the band name. Another fun fact, they were the first band to play, their album was played in pre-Glasnost, Russia, first rock and roll from the United States over there. Okay, so some suggestions on structure and clarity, and I believe in the Mentimeter you showed this ranked pretty low. With the work that we do with organizations, it commonly ranks low, that people need a little more structure and clarity. In other words, what's my role? So review the decision-making process of the team. Are job requirements known beyond just the org chart? I don't just know the org chart, I know what your play is and what your role is. In other words, how you can help and how I can help you. And when asked, each team member understands their role in the team and knows the role of the other teammates. At a sports field, it's very easy. Right? I can see what the offensive line is doing. I can see what the receiver is doing. In our workplace, it's very, very different, very much more, a little more difficult. I'm going to show you a video really quick. It's only about 60 or 70 seconds. This is Bobby McFerrin, and he is an incredible, incredible musician and artist. And I'm going to show you what happens when you put structure and clarity in music. Here we go.
Watch.
Ba, ba. Ba, 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 ba.
Okay.
Oh, look, and I cut it off right before it started getting good. It's a great video. Again, we'll provide that link for you later. And if you don't mind, again, in the chat, please mention what are ways that you've increased structure and clarity in your own organization so other people can learn from that. And we're going to transition into the 4th one, meaning. Sarah?
All right, meaning important or worthwhile quality, in other words, purpose. This looks like I have a sense of purpose in the work or the output of the work. And specifically, I can personally identify with it. So I can draw a thread from my role or my behaviors from a day-to-day standpoint to the purpose of the organization. One way that we know this is happening is when team members use values as a decision-making tool. So one of the suggestions we have for you is to understand and have the conversation with your team members of how is your work allowing us to achieve our meaning or purpose. How do we start meetings or projects with the context? So one of our favorite tools that we've mentioned before is Ask Why, Tell Why. So it's not necessarily that we're constantly going to be bringing up the grandiose vision, but we are going to start meetings by saying, do we understand why this is so critical to where we're going as an organization? So an example that we have for you is IKEA. Their purpose, their kind of mission statement is to create a better everyday life for the many people. So that's the translation. But the idea is they're not a furniture company. My job within IKEA is to make your life a little bit more simple. And so you see how that manifests itself all the way from the fact that, yes, they do have kind of the dollar ice cream cones, my boy's favorite part of going to IKEA. I'm going to make your life a little bit more simple from how they run their checkout, from how they package, from how it's self-serve, from how that all of their lay flat kind of boxes can actually fit into your vehicle. So can I, as an individual IKEA associate or team member, relate, this is what I show up to do every single day that increases the meaning in the work. One of the examples we also wanted to give you connects back to our parent company. And so most of you are familiar, some of you may not, but our parent company is a capital equipment goods manufacturer. So we make all the machines that package all the things that you see in the grocery store. And so we used to share orders in this way. And I know highly, highly inspirational. Here's, it's basically a product requisition. And there's an incoming packet and there's outgoing work. And so in an effort to connect for our team members, here's why the work is important. And it's just not coming as a printout off of a machine. This is how we share an order now. We build this as the exact kind of replica of what we would post in front of a station that says, here's the company, here's the person that purchased it. So you see Pacino Lee is the actual customer. We're going to use his name. Here's where we're shipping to, and here's what the customer is trying to accomplish. Here's what it means, not only to the customer, but actually in this case, to the country of Nicaragua that we do this work. And here's how we got the order. So here's the context of what could be repeated to get future orders. And here's what the customer expects of us. So I'm giving, yes, the context, but I'm also connecting it to the human element. And then suddenly I'm not just doing this part of a machine, I'm helping to create a future for this particular customer in this particular country. So one small idea of how you translate meaning into everyday work. And then this from Bob Marley, the people who are trying to make this world worse are not taking the day off. Why should I? So the work of leadership is to expand the meaning for the people in our span of care. A final attribute is impact, to have a strong effect on someone or something. So this looks like, as a team member, I understand that the results of my work contributes to the organizational goals. I can trace all of my projects back to where we're going as an organization. And some suggestions similar to meaning, am I starting each meeting by calling that out and calling it out really, really explicitly? And one of our favorite questions also is to ask, what's the greatest frustration in the work that you do? Not necessarily how can we make this process more efficient, but I know that you want to have impact. Therefore, we want to reduce the frustration in whatever process or system that we have. So kind of a classic example of impact comes back into NASA putting a man on the moon and JFK taking a tour, walking up to the janitor, and he asked the gentleman, what do you do? What work do you do for NASA? And he's standing there holding a broom, and he says, I'm putting a man on the moon. Do I understand that I play this particular role in the organization, but I'm very clear that my work connects to this particular impact? And so one of the phrases that we use a lot is, for the amount of effort I expend, I expect an equal or greater amount of impact in return. And we know that it's incredibly frustrating if I'm constantly putting in effort and not yielding a particular impact. A musical analogy would essentially be, if I'm playing the drums and it's making no sound. And so we would quickly stop, and a reflection would be, in your organization, are there individuals who are essentially playing the drums but making no sound? And we know that we are not. So we're going to give you a way to measure that.
Yeah, we're going to give you a way to measure that, as Sarah mentioned. So this is the Chapman & Co. Organizational Performance Culture Survey that we run with our clients. We break it into 3 areas: the people, you can see those aspects there, the purpose, and the process. For those of you that have joined late, we will provide all of these slides to you. In this organizational survey, we've pulled out questions that match to each one of the 5 effective drivers of being a great and effective team. We pulled those questions from our survey that allows you to talk to your people to determine not just a self-evaluation of, do I think psych safety is high or low? I'm going to ask these discrete questions. So there are 3 of them for each one of the areas under psych safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, and impact. These are questions that allow you to drive into not only is it high or is it low, but what are some things we can do about it? So these are straight from our culture survey. It's a great discussion point that you can have with your team. And just not making a joke about this, but if you're worried about, well, am I going to get the honest feedback? Well, that would be a great indicator that your psychological safety is a little bit low right there. So this is a really great way to have a discussion with your team to diving into this. And again, if you don't mind, in the chat room, ways that you've increased meaning and impact in your own organization and teams, put those in the chat room so other people can learn from you. It'd be very, very much appreciated. As we wrap this up and get into the work of leadership, these are the 5 factors. And I know there's a lot of work done on the whole meaning, and you could call it purpose or why. It's not that those things aren't important. It's that other things are more important for a team. So am I safe to ask for help? Can I get the job done on time and to standards? Do I understand what my role is? Those are the top 3 things for any team, whether that would be healthcare, nonprofit, for-profit, sports, military, any of these. And you think about as well, one of these without the others doesn't work either. I know a lot of healthcare organizations that have a beautiful meaning, purpose, and yet if I'm not treating people very well, I don't have that psychological safety to ask for help, or the dependability, it's not a very effective team. It's just a really nice purpose statement. So all five of these, excuse me, make up that effective team. And now we're going to talk about how we do the work of leadership for that. Sarah?
All right, I'm going to create the inspirational environment. I'm going to rate my current state. And then it really does come down to doing the work of leadership. And so I know you've been waiting for the answer to this question. There is, in fact, an I in team if you translate it to all of these languages. And so while we're using that, not in jest, I think it's actually an interesting point in the pictures of the All Blacks, so the New Zealand rugby team. But there is a role for the leader in the team that's very, very specific. The work of leadership, I mentioned this point before, is to build, nurture, and rebuild teams. When you break it down to the essence of what leadership is, that's the job. We further break it down into work on self, work on team, and work on my business. The working in the business, the running around the meetings, the answering of the emails, that is not, in fact, the work of leadership. We all have to do it, and we would never suggest that you get out of it. We just like to call out the fact that it's not actually the work of leadership. So one reflection question would be, what's the percentage of my time that I'm spending working on the team? If you were with us for our strategic planning webinar, and we focused on working on the business. This one is to say, am I going to dig in and really think about the energy and time I invest in people development? So to that end, we want to give you some immediate next steps that you can do with your team. One is share Project Aristotle. If you want to have them rank what's most important to them, where they see strengths and opportunities in your team, or use the resources, and we'll send these to you, that are on Google's website. There's some great discussion guides that you can use. Use the guiding questions that Matt just walked through. So 3 questions for each, and have people rank or just say yes, no. Do I agree or disagree with these statements? And then perhaps why that is. One of the most effective facilitation tools we find is when somebody says, you know what, it's not our area of strength. And we would encourage you to ask them for a specific story. Okay, really appreciate the feedback. Can you give me a specific story of where we've struggled in this area? And then focus on where the team interacts, meetings. We had a question come into the chat that which of these 5 factors do you see as most important, or what's the most critical work for frontline team members who are engaged in the current kind of crisis? For a lot of us, our work has changed. I think we would offer that the list stays the same, it just becomes magnified. So for people who are in highly stressful situations, I have to double down on the degree to which I'm really emphasizing psychological safety. Saw great comments in the chat talking about, I have to say out loud, we're gonna make mistakes. I have to say out loud, I really want you to tell me when you don't know. And I have to say out loud as the leader that I need you to ask for when you need help. We're all in a stressful situation, and so active leadership is actually asking for help. So a few immediate next steps as you transition this work into your team.
And I just wanted to make sure we're answering some other stuff from the questions from the room here before we jump into asking you for some feedback. One of the comments came into what generation do we see as being kind of better teammates or being better effective teams. I know this runs a little bit counter, and some people have made a lot of inroads on, let me tell you about the millennial generation or these generation. In our work, and I'm being very honest about this, don't see a difference, really don't. I see these 5 factors coming up. In my background in my military would say the exact same thing, but I don't see these being very different at all, nor do we cater differently to, well, if it's a team of Gen Zs or millennials or Gen Xs, I'm literally going right back into these 5 factors. And there was another question about how do we balance between the need for human connection and the fact that Google found that co-location wasn't a driver of team effectiveness. I don't think those 2 things are in opposition. People do want human connection as we're doing this right now, but I want to be in person, absolutely. What Google found was that it was not the primary driver, though, of team effectiveness. And when you think about that, just because I put people into one area doesn't mean that they're going to be an effective team. Background in the military, I did a lot of things that were of a classified nature, and so there were times that we would have to work where we couldn't bring on our own mobile phones or anything. And some people would say, oh, that's when the best work was done. That's entirely false. It just is. Just because I put people in and take away their technology doesn't mean they bond really well. And that's why we're giving you these questions and bringing you through these steps of how do I actually increase psychological safety? One way as the leader is literally by being a lot of vulnerable, by saying you don't know when you don't know, by asking a lot of questions. That's did a really nice job of mentioning about the front line, psych safety, especially when safety is a concern. I literally want people to speak up. So these 5 factors were much more of that. I'm looking through just to make sure that I didn't get any of missing here. And I know, and thank you for the chat room about someone mentioning about Fred Falker, his work on diversity is really, really diversity and inclusion. We consider it like seminal work, landmark work, really fantastic work. And we partner with Fred on this to where generations is a line that we made up, that we wrote down. And I get that there could be some characteristics that we might phrase of that, but from an effective team position, we don't see it that different at all. Is there anything else from you in the chat or in the Q&A that I'm missing before we ask for some feedback?
Yeah, I think just a couple comments that were in there. I think somebody who put in that Google seems to miss the diversity of the team. I think that certainly could be argued as a critical component. And there's lots of, not to go all the way down the D&I road, but certainly research would say that the more diversity I have, and that's all aspects of diversity, then the better decisions that I make and the better ideas that are generated. An additional comment, people almost seem to hire and assemble teams in their own likeness. I think it is generally true that we gravitate perhaps to people who work in a similar style as we do. And it does take a different lens or some effort to look at. And you know, this is a kind of a historical reference, but that's why the book Team of Rivals, Abraham Lincoln, is kind of so famous and so much talked about and people found value in, because it essentially was him saying, I'm going to pull together a team that's really unlike me, so that we can have the best decisions and the best kind of outcome as we possibly can.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the other question. Do we have a webinar on diversity? We don't do diversity, but we do inclusion, and we do have one coming up. In fact, it is an entire course, so it's a 2-part, and I'll mention that in a second really quickly, though. I need to bring you back into Mentimeter. This is not for us, but this is feedback to each other. So if you don't mind going back into Mentimeter, what have you learned or will do differently as a result of this webinar? These things are going to scroll, and it's not a part about, hey, this is what I liked with the webinar or didn't like. It's what I'm going to do differently or what I'm thinking about so that other people can see what you are doing. So if you don't mind back into Mentimeter, and I know it's a little bit challenging, but just type that in and these will start to scroll as these elements come in. Reach out for feedback, true feedback, absolutely. Especially when you're asking for that feedback, it's such a gift, and then it drops you into more of a listening mode. Focus more on psychological safety. Ask why the work is meaningful. Sure. Evaluate the current teams. Yep. Sharing mistakes without criticism. If you were in our last webinar, we quoted Mandela, right, who says, I never lose. I win or I learn. A great quote. Share what I've learned. And if you want any of that, I know we're at number 4 on this leadership series. If you want to see any of the previous ones, you can go into our website, ccoleadership.com/resources, and you can grab any of the recordings there and see and get those slides. If you would like the slides from us, we'll send you those as well from past webinars. Talk with my team differently about our role as teammates to get real and candid feedback. Absolutely. The greatest system frustration is such a great question to ask, because you're literally asking someone about the human element of their work. Don't ask them how they can be more efficient, because you're implying they're inefficient. Don't ask them how we can reduce waste or increase efficiency or all those things. Just ask, what frustrates you about your job system-wise? And you'll get into that structure and clarity really, really quickly. Be more open-minded in the team environment. That's another great one. Thank you. I'm going to switch this back here because I want to be cognizant and respectful of your all time. I'm going to drop the last one as feedback to us. So I'm going to launch this polling. And Jamie, if you can just let me know in the chat room if the poll question did come up. And when it does, if you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and answer it. It's just 4 really quick questions. And it's so appreciated because it allows us to continually improve. Question, what about balancing the various strengths of team members to facilitate success? That's a great one, and it's a good one, timely to bring up, because actually on our team this morning, we were just talking about that. One is when I have enough psychological safety, I'm not threatened by someone else's strengths, and I can bring those up to the team. Every single person probably has, to a varying degree, of strengths, and the more psychological safety I have, the more I can name that and actually not be threatened by it as if I'm a lesser person for naming that someone is able to do a skill set within the team even better. So a good example of that. I'm going to transition over lastly here. I just have a couple final slides. One is the Greatest Hits album. So we are running number 5, Turn Up the Trust. Never has your team or your customers needed you more. We're running that this Thursday. That's straight from our content that we use. Another one to be highly interactive. We'll talk not just about trust conceptually, but we'll talk about what are the steps I take as a leader to evaluate it, and then how can I build it, rebuild it, and work with both my customers and inside my own organization to increase that. Lastly, how we can help. We can assess your team, your culture. We can do that for you very easily. We can help pivot your strategic plan. We can help you run your meetings. We do executive coaching, and we do custom webinars and training. Every good tour has some guest artists. We've got 3 coming up. First is Rhonda Spencer. She's the Chief People Officer this Thursday. So please join us. Go to ccoleadership.com/resources. Rhonda's webinar, we'll do a Q&A format with her. She's a spectacular, incredibly talented person. And so when you think about Barry Wehmiller, we're 110 different acquisitions all over the world. And so she's dealing with COVID. And so if you're in the leadership or HR, traditional HR space, please join us for that. Chris Zimmerman, he's the president of the Stanley Cup winning St. Louis Blues. We're going to have him on April 29th. That'll be really great. We'll do a quick round with him, about an hour webinar Q&A. So hear from Stanley Cup. Their purpose, when you think about meaning, is to bring community together. So what does an organization do when you can't actually be on the hockey rink? The last one there, Kristen Hadid, we have her on May 6th. She's the CEO of Student Made, the author of Permission to Screw Up, a good friend of ours, another incredibly talented person. So please come and join us for those 3 interviews and Q&A. We will take your questions live in those sessions as well. It is right on the hour. It is noon. Thank you so very much. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to come off video. We're going to go into mute, but we will stay on and we'll answer any questions that you have. We'll just type them in so you all can see them. We're going to play you out from the album Abbey Road. This is the Beatles with Come Together. Make it a great day. Thank you so much.